Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's Facebook Live session. Had a really good week this week. We've had a really nice opportunity to have some really good conversations with a lot of businesses, and I've personally been meeting up with a lot of businesses who've called in off the back of these sessions, who've wanted a little bit more advice, wanted a bit more help, wanted us to come and pick some issues up for them as well. So I just want to say to anyone who's watching today, if you want a bit more advice, you want us to help you with any of the issues that are discussed today and anything else we can do for you, we've had a lot of businesses contact us. I'll come on and meet with those people as well. We've got a phone number, and that phone number is 0800 046 3179. And there's a web address, which is krona.co.uk/FB Live. So that's if you want any more help, you want anything else that gets discussed here today, you want something a little bit more bespoke for your business and seeing what we can do for you. I've been on quite a few conversations with some fantastic businesses this week, and really nice that a lot of those businesses want some help from us as well, which we're more than happy to provide. So format for today is what we usually run through every week. I'm going to go through some updates first of all about things that have changed this week, and we've got the new flexible furlough scheme which got clarified on Friday. I'm going to run through how that works. Got some FAQs, some of the ones we didn't get around to last week. We had such a high subscription last week. We've got great following every week, but really high numbers last week, a lot of questions, and I've pulled some of those together to be able to give some FAQs and some answers. But then we'll move on to the Q&A session. And what I'm guessing a lot of people are going to want to know today is, how does the new flexible furlough scheme really fit their business, and how does this work, and what are we going to be able to do post-July? So really looking forward to getting into those questions today and seeing what help we can provide on that. So if, as usual, you see there's a comments bar, if you could just pop a question into that comments bar, and feel free to ask anything you want to ask. Pop a question into the comments bar, and we can let them build up while I go through the initial part. And then when we move on to the Q&A part, then I'll jump into those questions and jump down and answer those ones. So if we go through a few updates first, and I'll update you on what's happened over the last week. We've had quite a few big changes over the last week, which is really exciting to go through today. Move through the FAQs, and then I can move on to the questions which we ask. So yeah, just feel free to pop them in the comments bar now, and I'll get to them when we go through. So got a few updates that I wanted to go through first, and the new one that we're going to go through that I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions about is we got details of the new flexible furlough scheme. So last session I did was last Wednesday, and we got details of the scheme over the weekend. So what we know now is what that new scheme is going to look like. So I'll give a bit of an overview about what got announced, what got clarified. Then feel free to ask me some questions, and we'll let you know how it applies that to individual businesses as well. So we already know new flexible furlough scheme is going to start on the 1st of July, and that's going to last for 4 months. So you're going to have July, August, September, and October, 4 months, and it's going to end on the 31st of October. And what has been clarified is that it's going to give us maximum. It's going to give us maximum flexibility to furlough when and where we want. So what that means for us is that if we want to furlough somebody for all of the week, but we want them in for 1 or 2 hours, we can do that. We can claim for the rest under the flexible furlough scheme. And if we still want to furlough somebody for 100% of their hours, then we can do that under the scheme. So gives us maximum flexibility. So what it says is that employers can bring back furloughed employees back to work for any amount of time on any shift pattern, while still being able to claim under the coronavirus job retention grant for the hours not worked. That's great, really simple, gives us maximum flexibility. And I know I've had a few questions asked before about, well, what if I want somebody back on a few hours a day or a half day or something like that? How's that going to work? And I know that I've given advice over previous weeks that the way I like to do it, if I'm going to phase somebody back into work, is rather than just give them a Monday and a Tuesday back in work and then they're off work for 5 days, is maybe a half day Monday, a half day Tuesday, a half day Thursday, and a half day Friday, and get them used to coming into work 2 days, 1 day off, 2 days in, 2 days off. And I kind of like that working pattern as well. I think that works well. So great that we've got maximum flexibility with it. Also, we've got clarity on, and this is a question that had a really helpful letter off somebody last week, a letter they had from the HMRC that says if somebody is furloughed at any point earlier, that we can use the scheme. And we had a bit of a confusion about this, of whether or not somebody has to be furloughed on the 10th, actually on furlough on the 10th. for us to be able to use the scheme. Now, great, got a really nice letter from somebody last week. Thank you for that. And that's been clarified in the new guidance that came out, that if an employee has previously been furloughed for at least 3 consecutive weeks taking place anytime between the 1st of March 2020 and the 30th of June. So nice, we've got that clarity now that if somebody wasn't on furlough on the 10th, we can still use the new flexible furlough scheme, which comes in at the beginning of July. So that's really nice to know that's been clarified. And the other thing was that when you put in a claim in under the new furlough scheme, is that claim has to be for a minimum period of 1 week. Lacked a bit of clarity at first about what that really meant. We're thinking that's for administrational purposes to be able to claim it back from the HMRC, that you can't claim for 1 day and then claim for another day and then claim for another day in the same calendar week. That for them it means calendar weeks, so you have to claim for a minimum period of a calendar week at a time. So nice that we got that. That's a bit of an overview about that. And what we also got was a nice table that broke out how payments work and what we can claim backwards under that scheme. Just really simply, a way to think about this as a business is that what you pay to your employees under the new scheme and up until the end of October is not going to change unless you're paying them 100%. But let's think about an 80% example. So if you're paying your employees 80% and they're on furlough, they're still going to keep receiving that 80% for the time they're furloughed. For when they're back in work, they get full pay under their contract, but they get 80% of that pay. And what we can claim back as businesses, that's what's changing. What the employees are getting who are on furlough, you've got someone who's on furlough all the way up until the end of October, they're still going to get 80% of their pay. But if you've got an employee who is working part of the time, they're going to get part of that pay. But what is changing is that what we can claim back is going down. So June is the same, July is the same, August, we can't claim back employers' contributions for national insurance and pension. September, and that's the same throughout. That's the same throughout. September, we can only claim 70% back, and October that goes down again. We can only claim 60% back. So that scheme is diminishing down and looking a bit less attractive for businesses as it goes on, to encourage people to come back into work and start to get their salaries and remove the burden that's in place on the scheme. So sure, I'm going to get some questions about how that new flexible scheme is going to work, but really simply, it's got maximum flexibility. As long as an employee has been furloughed for at least 3 weeks at any point while we've been able to furlough, that's fine. And the claim period for a minimum period of 1 week. So we'll get into some questions about that if I get that later. So that was the first thing that I wanted to go through. The next thing that I had was about retail. So this has been a massive week. Shops opened on Monday, non-essential retail opened on Monday, and this was kind of like a spark back on for the economy. I think everybody saw 2-hour queues to get into Primark, 2-hour queues to TK Maxx, and you had queues which were over a mile long, so people were obviously desperate to get back and get shopping. But we had 82 days where non-essential retail was closed, and this has really been like a big lights on for the economy. I think that people will have seen how busy the roads have been, how busy public transport's been over this period. Don't think if you're not in retail, this doesn't affect you, though. This does affect you. It affects you substantially, because as business owners, what we need to be thinking about is we think about there's going to be a big increase on the burden on public transport. If you've got somebody who drives into work, one of your employees, it's not really going to be a substantial difference if they're stuck in traffic for a bit longer. They're not really a heightened increase of being exposed to a virus, unless they've got an arrangement of how they get to work, where they park, things like that. I wouldn't be thinking of that as too much of a difference. However, if your employees and you work in a city and your employees get public transport into work, you need to think about how that's going to change, because it might be that your workplace is COVID secure, and that is essential. I've said that at every session. 1, 2, and 3 on the list before we talk about anything to do with employment law is we need to have sorted out our health and safety and make sure that we're COVID secure. But whether we're safe in the workplace, as this example, what we need to be thinking about now is that employees are going to be raising issues about the means of getting to work. So they won't raise a question that the workplace is unsafe. What they might start raising now, and we've seen quite a lot of this from the businesses which we advise, are saying that the way in which they're getting to work has changed. They don't feel like that's as safe anymore. And what onus has we got of that as business owners and people managing people? Well, what we need to think about there is, have we done the right thing when it comes to start times? Do we need to look at changing start times of our staff? Do we need to look at providing PPE for our staff? So there's mandatory they wear PPE on public transport. Should we help them with that? Should we help them? Should we provide some of that? And think about, there's going to be an increased amount of issues raised by employees I don't feel safe coming into work. Could this fall over into being a disclosure about health and safety as well, and the protection that they get under that as well? So thinking about that environment, even though we might have had it nicely set up before, might be changing a little. And as businesses, just another bit of a consideration there as well. And the third thing that I wanted to go through was the PM's briefing on Wednesday. So we had this last session last Wednesday, and that evening we had a briefing which the PM took himself. And in that briefing, he gave us 4 really key updates. One of them I think is really important. I'll cover the other 3 first, and then the 4th one. So one of them, well, all shops are going to be allowed to be open from Monday. That was something we knew already. The other one was outdoor attractions can open up. I said that we thought this was going to get announced in last session. This did get announced. So where people can stay in their cars, safaris, drive-in cinemas, zoos, but indoor areas at zoos remain closed. And places of worship were set to open for individual prayer, which they did do last weekend. So they were the 3 things, first of all, that got announced. And I think we know how they impact us. We know about shops. The attractions, we're fine as long as we're not in that industry, and places of worship as well, something to think about for employees at weekends. However, the thing that did come out, which was important, something to consider for us as business owners, was the new support bubble. So what the announcement was that if the thoughts about this is relaxing of some of the social contact rules. So if you're a single adult household, so an adult living alone, or a single parent with a child under 18, you can create a support bubble with one other household. So they need to act as if they've got the same household, and no one shielding can form a support bubble. Now, what I don't do in these sessions every week is, even though I look at this stuff and it's things that are relevant, I don't have a big focus on the changes that are made outside of the workplace. This is very workplace focused. There are changes to social distancing rules. I don't really talk about how many people can go in a garden, about how many people can get together in those type of areas, how many people you can meet up with and go for a walk with. That's not really relevant to these sessions. And I'm trying to keep this focused on businesses and how this affects us from an employment law and a health and safety perspective. However, I do think that this part of it has a bleed over into HR. And there's a couple of points in this that I think are really relevant and to consider as business owners. One is this support bubble gives employees more options when it comes to childcare. So as of before, we've got some employees on furlough, and I've got asked this question quite regularly. And we spoke about back to school last week, reception year 1, year 6 going back to school, and the decision was that other years weren't going back in primary, and the consideration about secondary schools as well. And what that meant for businesses where they've got work for employees, they want the person to come back to work, but the individual is saying, well, I know schools aren't open until September. I've got childcare, and I used to have childcare that was helped with by somebody else, but because of social distancing rules, I can't use them anymore. Maybe a parent, an elderly parent, something like that. We can't use them anymore. So we need to look at what other options we've got. And that means that they're refusing to come back to work. And we as businesses have had that situation, which from the employee's perspective is very reasonable as well, because they do have childcare. They have no other options. They can't come back. That's something that we need to consider. Well, now they've got another option. That can they go into a support bubble with another person who can help them, another single parent who can help them, children under 18 who can help, and they can take care of those children. Maybe for some of the days they come back under the new part-time scheme for you. They work 2 days for you. The other person works 2 days, and they alternate the childcare on each week as well. That's another option. It just gives us another option as businesses to consider. And maybe if you've got those employees who before were saying, because of childcare commitments, I can't come back to work. Well, now we've got another option that we can revisit those conversations, and we can say to them, okay, we heard about the new support bubble. Who's in your support bubble now? Is that somebody who can help with these childcare arrangements? Is that a way in which we, on a part-time basis, can maybe get you back? Is that something we can look into? I think that's a really important thing to consider, as this is going to be an ever-changing situation. Going back and revisiting with those employees who said they couldn't come back as the situation evolves and better measures come into place to be able to manage certain things which are stopping them coming into work. So I thought that one point was really important. And the other point that I thought was really important was that we may see an increase in the number of employees saying that they need to self-isolate because somebody within their bubble is showing symptoms. What you had a pool of people, and what it says is act as if these people are in your family. That was the word in the PM, act as if they're in your family. So act as if they're in your same household. And I'm in a household, and I've got my partner, and we're at home, and we're not showing symptoms, but we have it where If I was a single parent, I'm thinking I might bubble with somebody else. And what I'm doing then is I've got a child, and I'm exposed to another family and their child. It's just increasing the risk of somebody saying, well, somebody else in my bubble is showing symptoms. And that's just something that we need to deal with as employers when that comes up. So just another consideration that you might get that issue raised, that now the pool of people are saying, well, somebody I live with's got this issue, somebody I've been in contact with has got this issue now. They just gave me an increased contact and an increased level of people saying that I might have symptoms as well. So I thought that was another one to consider. But the real key one for businesses to think about is childcare, and maybe revisiting that question with your employees. So they were the three really key updates that I had from last week. I'm sure that people have got more questions on how the scheme works. And like I said, please feel free to pop the questions in the comments section, and I'll run through them. A few more questions about the practicalities of how this new scheme works. And that's the purpose of these sessions, to give businesses practical guidance on how this actually works, really straight answers on how this is actually going to work for your business. So feel free to pop anything in there, and hopefully those questions will help some other people as well. Now, I've got 4 FAQs that I just want to go through. And these were questions which I pulled together from questions that we had asked last time and we couldn't get around to. So first one is that we have an employee we furloughed in March and has been back into work. And as of the 10th of July, they weren't furloughed. Can they be furloughed under the new scheme? Yes. Now, had you asked that question last week, or had I answered that question last week, which I did for another couple of people, I thought it was really good to revisit this question, because the answer last week was, we don't really know. Safest bet is to make sure that your employees are on furlough as of the 10th. Even if they've been furloughed for 3 weeks prior, the safest bet was to make sure they were on furlough as of the 10th. Now, for businesses that didn't do that, but had furloughed them for a minimum period of 3 weeks before, that's okay. That's fine. They can be used under the new scheme, and that was clarified when the new guidance came out. So that question is a lot more straightforward now. I'll give you a lot straighter answer on that. Yes, you can use the new scheme with them. So another question we've got is, can employees be furloughed full-time in July, or is it only part-time? This is a question that we've been getting asked by quite a few people, because the government guidance on this does not really specify on this point. However, I don't think it needs to, because exactly what the government guidance says is that employees can be furloughed, employees back to work for any amount of time and any shift pattern. Well, any amount of time must include from 1 minute to 100% of their time in work. So yes, I think we're pretty safe to say that yes, employees who were on 100% furlough before can continue to be on 100% furlough under the new scheme. Just appreciate that as a business, and that is the case up until the end of October, just appreciate that as a business, what you can claim back under that scheme is going to diminish from August. So August, September, October, you've got a diminishing return on what you can claim back under the job retention scheme. The third question I had was, due to increased demand, I want to make a temporary increase to working hours for some of my staff. Should this be done as overtime, or should this be a variation to their contract of employment? The first answer on this, and when I get asked questions about certain terms and conditions, what you always need to think about is, if this is bespoke to a business, there's no overarching rule on this. This is contract law. This is what's agreed between both parties in the contract. So first question would be to have consideration of the contracts and see what they say. If the contracts have got an overtime clause in there, or an overtime policy that we use as a business, I'd use that overtime policy, I'd use that clause. If we don't, you could agree with them that we've got an overtime provision, and we could also look at agreeing a variation to their contract as well, to incorporate an increased amount of hours for a certain period of time, going back down to a certain level of hours after a period of time. I think probably the most straightforward way to do it, though, would be an overtime scheme that you have, or an overtime clause or an overtime agreement with them, that they can work overtime and that what they will be paid during those overtime hours. I think that's probably the most straightforward way to do it, rather than agree a variation to working hours and a variation back as well. Just what you need to think with an overtime scheme is whether or not it's going to be compulsory that they work those hours, and just have a little think about how that's drafted up, how that clause is worded as well. And the last FAQ that I had was that I don't think that my premises will be able to comply with the current 2 metre distancing rules, even when we can open. What are my options? Now, I've paraphrased this question because quite a lot of people asked about this. This was something that came up a lot. And it's a question that, well, great, on Monday, 82 days shut, all of this non-essential retail opened, brilliant for Primark, great for John Lewis, IKEA, who could open a little bit earlier. That's fine. But how does that affect my small high street shop? I live in a village, and the village is full of small shops. None of those shops could you have 2 meter distancing, and you couldn't have social distancing in those shops unless you had one person entry at a time and people going in the shop one at a time and a queue outside the shop and having queues down the street looking like that. The options for businesses at the moment are limited when you're small. If you can't comply with that 2 meter distancing, we've got a real problem, and that's why there's so much pressure increasing on the PM at the moment to revisit that 2 meter and take a look at bringing that down to 1 meter. Now, 1 meter is totally different. At 1 meter social distancing, then that would be fine in a smaller shop. That would mean these smaller operations could open and be COVID secure and have their risk assessments done. But we've got an issue at the moment. If that isn't done, and then the amount that a business can claim back is starting to taper down as of August, I think that it has to be the case that over the next 6 weeks that we get a decision on the 1 meter rule. I'm not saying that I think the 1 meter rule will come down over the next 6 weeks. If it was my personal opinion, I think it will. But there needs to be some type of communication on that. Because once you get to a point where these businesses who have all of their staff furloughed for the reason that, yes, in theory they could open, they're a shop, they're a non-essential retail, they could open. They're not a bar or restaurant, they're a non-essential retail. They could open, but they can't comply with the 2 meter distancing rule because of their size or the layout of their building. Then the government needs to address that, and they need to say that we appreciate that, and we're going to look at maybe something different under the job retention scheme for those businesses who can't return because of COVID compliance, which I don't think they'll do. I think what we'll do is we'll revisit the 2 meter rule and bring it down to 1 meter, which will allow those premises to open. But in answer to this question, the options at the moment are limited. If you've got, first of all, like I always say, you need professional support for somebody to come in and have a look at your risk assessments and have a look at your health and safety compliance. That's absolutely key. I wouldn't recommend to any business that they look at this, especially in the current environment, with how much scrutiny this is going to be under from the HSE, who've had a £14 million investment to investigate this, and rightly so that they should be doing this to make sure that people are safe. That's something that we're going to have to, as business owners, a risk we're going to have to think about, and we need to make sure that our employees are safe and that we've done the appropriate risk assessments, and that's all in place. If you're a shop that's very small, that's going to struggle with a 2 meter in any type of measure, no matter how much you put in your risk assessment, how many changes you make, you might be restricted from opening until the 1 meter rule comes into place. So there, your options really is one, you could look at opening now, but how that's going to look and how difficult that's going to be, maybe one more customer at a time, something like that. Or you can look at waiting until that 1 meter rule's reduced. But like I said before, always be conscious that what you can claim back under the job retention scheme is going to be diminishing as of August. So that's the options that a business has got. And I think that this was an unintended consequence of this, that think about even more so than the people who can't have the social distancing rules. We need a decision on bars and restaurants as well. I've been giving advice to a lot of bars, restaurants this week. I spoke to quite a few this week, and they're all starting to move towards the thought of redundancies now, because they've not been given a date when they can open. They're not sure when this is going to be, and if what they can claim back is going to start diminishing, and they're going to have to not be able to have these employees back, but start to pay 100% of their wages, 80% of their wages, and what they can claim back coming down, then they're going to have to start to make up that shortfall. Then that's going to put them in financial difficulty, and that's something that a lot of businesses have been speaking to me about this week and wanting a bit of advice about what their options are. And I've been discussing their options with them. I've been laying them options out to them, and it's something for me as business owners they need to be thinking about now, really. And it's going to be difficult for them to fingers crossed kind of wait for something to come through from the government that's going to help them when they need to be thinking about measures and timescales and things they know into place now. So if I just move over to the questions now, and like I said, anyone has got any questions they want to answer, just pop them into the comments section, and I'll move around and move through them as we go through. So if I move on to these questions now, I've got a first question here from Stephen. Can we make use of flexible furlough before July? No, the flexible furlough scheme doesn't come into place until the 1st of July. So as it stands now, up until the end of this month, the only scheme we've got in place is the old scheme as it was before. So no, you can't bring somebody back on part-time hours and claim back for furlough for them. If you bring somebody back on even 1 hour's work now, you can't claim under the current job retention scheme. You only have the ability to do that from the 1st of July. Okay, Sean. Can staff that are on furlough, excuse me, can staff that are on furlough be asked to take a pay cut? So when I've dealt with some of these questions in previous weeks, I'll go back to this and open this into a bit of a wider point, is that the job retention scheme did not supersede employment law. Employment law still sits there exactly as it did before. Nothing's changed with employment law. The only thing that has changed is that employers have been given another option that they're able to use. And that option is the job retention scheme. That option is to place an employee on furlough. A term that I feel like I've said 10,000 times and I hadn't said it. I didn't even know what it was at the beginning of this year. But this is something that's brand new that's been brought in. It's another option for us to consider. And what you need to think is take a step back from that and think that, well, what would happen in a normal circumstance? So in a normal circumstance, can employees take a pay cut? Absolutely. Of course, employees can take a pay cut. What you need to think about when it comes to a reduction in salary is two things, really. Number one is that it doesn't take them below the national minimum wage. You can agree anything under a contract, as long as it doesn't break the law, it doesn't go below statute, it doesn't take them below annual leave entitlement for the year, national minimum wage. So, yeah, we can agree with a reduction in pay, as you could do with any employee prior to this. And so what some businesses are looking at the moment is agreeing with their employees to take a pay cut for a short period of time. So maybe 6 weeks. Take a pay cut for 6 weeks to get us through this, take a pay cut for 8 weeks to get us through this, and let's see where we are at the end of that period as an alternative to a redundancy consultation. So that's an option I've been speaking to a few businesses about this week that some of them have already taken up. So yes, you can have staff take a pay cut. First of all, make sure it doesn't go below the national minimum wage. The second thing that you need to ensure when you're doing anything like this, and this is the same for anything in contract law, is that you can't just change an employee's contract. We're not allowed to do that. The same as an employee can't just change their own contract. They can't just increase their own pay. They're not allowed to do that. How a contract works between two parties is that both parties need to agree on that change. So we would offer them that we wanted to do this pay cut as an alternative to redundancies, and they would accept that they wanted to do that. We'd get that in writing, and that, as long as that didn't go below national minimum wage, that would be fine, and they would move on to that new payment agreement after that point. So they're the two things to consider. Doesn't go below national minimum wage, and make sure that we've got agreement with the other party, because that's how you make a change to a contract. The same as we could do before all of this, and the same as we'll be able to do after all of this. So, hi, Michelle. So do we need to send a letter to extend furlough or confirm coming back? So it depends what option a business is going to go down. So I think that what we need to do with, if you've got agreement with staff that they're going to remain on a period of maximum furlough, have a look at how that was worded, have a look at how that was agreed between them. If you had an agreement with them, and some people did this, some businesses did this, that they had an agreement with them that we would have you on furlough for 3 months, because that was the original scheme, was only 3 months long. They extended it to 4, and now it's been extended all the way up till the end of October. So it happened in 3 phases how they extended the scheme. I think it would have overwhelmed people had they said at the beginning, we're going to do this all the way till October. But you had some businesses who said, we're going to do this for the next 3 months. Well, what needs to happen at the end of that 3 months is, as we know with furlough needs to be agreed between both parties. If you're going to pay 80% pay, you also need to agree with them that they're going to get 80% pay, because, like I said, the furlough doesn't supersede employment law. If you're going to pay somebody less than their contractual entitlement, you need to agree that with them. And the thing with the furlough payment was that is allowed to go below national minimum wage. That part is allowed to go national minimum wage, the furlough payment. So when we had that agreement with them, you need to think about what was in that original agreement. When we said that to them in that letter in the first place, what did we say? Did we say to them that it's indefinite and we'll revisit it and this will keep on going until you hear otherwise? And if we did that, then we're fine to just leave them on furlough. But if you didn't do that, then you need to write back to them, extend that furlough period and say, okay, we said 3 months originally, we said another month, we want to go further than that. And what I would do in that is clarify with them about what that's going to look like, whether or not that's going to be part-time coming back to work, whether or not that's going to be they're going to be on furlough 100% as they were before, and how that's going to work. And what a lot of businesses are thinking about as well is adjusting pay. So some businesses have decided to pay 100%, have now come back and thought, well, that was good for us. We wanted to do the right thing for our employees, and we did that for the first 3 months. We did it for another month now, but now we need to, especially with it going down, we need to think about dropping this down to the 80%. You can't go lower than 80. You do lower than 80, you can't claim back under the scheme. So they were thinking, we need to drop this down to 80%. And that's something that we've been giving advice about to quite a few businesses recently as well, is them revisiting that. And that one, Michelle, would require us to go back and get agreement, because that's new agreement. that's agreement for them, the second part of it, to not receive 100% of their pay. But I would be keeping in regular contact with the employees. That would be my advice. Keeping regular contact with the employees, give them regular updates on what's happening with the business. And I would be discussing with them about what my plans were going forward for the flexible period, for the period all the way up till October. And if my original agreement had me covered for that period and I was leaving them on full furlough, then I wouldn't say that you need to keep sending letters out to them. But if you're going to change their pattern, or if you only agreed it to a shorter window, you said you'd revisit it, then yeah, I would go back to them, because I think you probably need to go back and get their agreement for that extra period as well. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so I've got a question from Connor. If somebody was on maternity but it ends in July, can I put them straight onto furlough after, or do I need to bring them back to work? So I covered last week about something that the government clarified about family friendly, and the fact that the 10th of July cutoff didn't apply to those people. So if you've got somebody coming back from maternity, maybe July, August, September, they can move straight onto the new flexible furlough scheme. They don't need to have been on it previously. There's one caveat to that, though, is that your business needed to be registered on the job retention scheme. So your business needs to be registered on that, not that individual employee. So if you've got somebody coming back from maternity, yeah, they come back from maternity and you agree and they go straight onto furlough. They don't have to kind of spend a day in the office and then go back out again. You can agree with them that when their maternity ends, they move straight flush onto a period of furlough straight away from that day. And the 10th of July cutoff doesn't apply to those individuals as well, because if they're coming back after the 10th of July, there's no way they could have been furloughed in March, could they? Hope that answers the question. Okay, Sandrine, how do we formalise the flexible hours for the furloughed employees, including timesheets in the letter each week? This is a really, really good question. This is something that I've been talking about all week. And this is totally dependent on what system you have in place to do this. And I think a lot of businesses now, throughout this period, I've been doing this myself, is revisiting. It gives us a good opportunity to revisit how we do things, how we deliver things as businesses. And one of the things that I think a lot of businesses are thinking about in this period, especially with coming back, and how I've spoken about this before, is that putting people on furlough, even though the guidance changed quite regularly, that was the start of these sessions, and we were getting it piecemeal over a period of weeks, and I was changing the advice and keeping businesses updated each week on how this was changing. Finding out how we actually did it and what was right took a little bit of time. But the exercise of placing an employee on a period of furlough was, to an extent, quite straightforward. Go home. We need your agreement to go on furlough. We need your agreement to pay you 80% pay. Thank you. We'll be in touch. Just get yourself home and get yourself safe. So that was the relatively easy part of it. And any business who thinks that, well, the difficult part was done, and now, from a HR perspective, and now the thing I need to be thinking about is getting my business back up and running and focus on that. Well, unfortunately, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that is not the case at all. The hardest stuff is still to come. The difficult stuff is still to come. The difficult stuff is exactly what Sandrine mentioned, is about how we formalise the flexible hours of people returning to work. As a business, you might have had the luxury before that you're well versed in flexible hours and having a flexible workforce, and you have a variety of rotas and changing shift patterns, and you have a system which allows you to handle that. But for most businesses, they have employees who have a set amount of hours and they work those hours each week, and that's not going to be the case when we come back. That people are going to be wanting to phase their people back into workforces, and you need to think about the system that you have for formalising the flexible hours that you've got. Now, internally, for our clients, we have a system called Bright HR. And what this system does is it allows us to record all of our clients within that system. We can create a rota for all the employees within there, and we can push notifications, send that to their phone, and they get the rota. The rota comes through to the employees. Because what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to communicate en masse with a set of employees whose shift patterns are going to be changing each week, probably. The amount of time we want them back is going to be changing in the following weeks and coming up and phasing back to them coming back to work. And also, we need to be able to evidence that we've communicated this clearly with them as well. And the old wall planner or the Excel is not going to be great for you in this position. I think that businesses need to think, maybe take a step back and think about professionalising how they deal with that, because they're really going to struggle with their workforce if they've got ever-changing rotas, and formalising flexible hours for employees like that is going to be very difficult. What you do need to do on top of the means in which you communicate it out is, from a HR and employment law perspective, is you need to gain agreement for that employee. Just go back to what I was thinking about before. If we're going to change anything in anybody's contract, we need to agree it with them. Are we changing something in somebody's contract by asking them to work 2 days a week or half days? Yeah, we are. We're changing their working pattern, and we need to agree that with them. We need to go with them and agree to them how that's going to work. Now, we're in the situation where I can't see it being too common that an employee would refuse that, because the alternative to that is redundancy. Because we're saying as a business, or furlough, we've still got the option to leave them on furlough. But we as a business might say that option doesn't suit us now, so we need to think about redundancies. So I think that it would be difficult for an employee to say that, but we do need the agreement as well to make changes to employees' working hours as well. So that's how we formalise it from an employment law perspective, get their agreement, we make those changes, but businesses need to be thinking about the systems and how they do this, because the old way of doing it and the old antiquated systems aren't really going to cut it anymore. Okay, Lara, does that mean that they have to have 1 week off, then 3 weeks part-time and part furlough? 1 week off and 3 weeks part-time and part furlough. I'm not really sure what that question means. Does that mean that they have to have 1 week off and then 3 weeks part-time and part furlough? Right, okay, sorry, now I get you. So if you've got an employee who we return to work full-time, then do they need to be off for a period of 3 weeks of part-time furlough to be able to make that claim? That's a really good question. So furlough is still not changing that you have to claim it in blocks of 3 weeks, or in blocks of three. The minimum period is 3 weeks. But when the new flexible furlough scheme comes in, if we've got an employee who's in for a week, off for a week, in for a week, off for a week, can we make a claim for them? And that's fine, because you're claiming 100% for 1 week, you're claiming part of it for next week, you're claiming 100% for 1 week, part of it for next week. The question is, if you have an employee who comes in and works for 100% of the week and then doesn't work for 2 weeks and then comes in for 100% of the next week. Now, what it says is that we can claim for a minimum period of 1 week, but there's been no clarity on that point. So that's a good question. There's been no clarity on the point of whether or not you have a couple of weeks break as well. Okay, Beverly, got a question here. So just to clarify, if we had someone on furlough in April and May and June, they weren't, and we didn't claim for them and said they were no longer on furlough, can we put them on part-time from July? So someone in furlough in April and May, can we put them on furlough on the new scheme, even though they weren't furloughed at the point that we had the 10th of July switch over? Yes, you can. That got clarified. So if you've got somebody who you had furloughed April and May, but then they've been back in work completely since May, when it gets to July, yes, we can use the flexible furlough scheme. If you have someone who's never been furloughed, though, you can't use the new scheme. They have to have been on it for at least 3 weeks from March, beginning of March, up until the end of June. That's the rules. Okay, Sally. Sorry if you've answered this question. There's no apology necessary. Please, people, just put in questions, and if it feels unclear, I'll answer anything that you want to put in there. That's no problem. So with flexible furlough, can I bring someone back for a day to clear up a backlog and then put them back on furlough? There's no regular work for them. So prior to the 1st of July, no, you can't do that. That breaches the rules of the current furlough scheme. If they come back for 1 day to clear anything down, the 3 week clock starts again as of the next day. Under the new scheme, absolutely, yes, you can, and that's the purpose of the scheme. So yes, you can bring them back for 1 day, and then you would put them back on furlough. So if you took that as kind of a 3 week window, week 1, they come back for 1 day, and you would pay them for that day, and you would claim for the other 4 days in that week, and then the next week you would claim for 5 days and 5 days, and that's what you would make your claim for. So that is fine, and the clock doesn't reset again and have to start ticking again for 3 weeks. That's absolutely fine. Okay, Debbie, if an employee's maternity period ends this week, will they have to wait to be furloughed until the 1st of July? No. No, they can be furloughed now. After the 10th of July, that cut-off didn't apply. So yep, you can place them on furlough now. It's just that they won't be able to use the new flexible scheme until the 1st of July. They would be on the scheme where they were 100% furloughed, so they weren't working at all. But yeah, that's fine. Okay, Andy. May an employer ask employees if they have entered into a bubble situation with another household uh, before any query about self-isolation? So yes, it's absolutely fine for you to ask your employees what their situations are. To say to them that I mean, I think there'd be a reason for you raising that question with them. The reason would be that if they said, "Well, I can't come back to work because of childcare commitments," well, then I'd be saying to them, "Well, can I ask a little bit more about that? Is there anyone else who can help you with this? Is there any other options? Have you thought about the other options? Is there a family member? Is there someone else who lives with you? Can your partner cover this for some of the time? Are you, well, no, I'm a single parent. Well, have you thought about a bubble? Are you bubbling with somebody? Is that an option you've considered?" And I've been just having those conversations with my employees and saying to them, is that an option they've considered? Is that something that they think could work? Because I really need them back in work and I really want them to get back. We've got work for them. We're just looking at all the other options we've got, and I think that's a perfectly suitable question to ask them. Okay, Lynn, this is a question that we're getting most weeks and something that we're seeing across a lot of businesses that we provide advice and support to is that we've got some employees who are saying, right, okay, we as a business are ready for you to come back to work now. We want you to come back into the office. We want you to come back into the factory. We want you to come back to the construction yard. We want you back in work and we're ready for it. We've got work. Everything's picking back up again. Can you come back? And they say, I'm concerned about coming back to work. I'm concerned about catching the virus. I'm concerned about health and safety. What steps should I take as a business? So it's a really good question and one that we're getting asked a lot as well. I think it's a really good one for me to answer again because people will be interested in that. So before I go into this question, what I always say when I get asked this is number 1, 2, and 3 on your list, make sure that you've done your health and safety properly. You've done your COVID risk assessment, you're COVID safe, you've got a professional person in to come and do that for you. Because if you go for an option where you're saying to the employee, I'm more than encouraging you to come back to work now, then you want to make sure that you've got your health and safety in order. Everything's been done. And you need to have done that anyway. Before you even start thinking about offering employees to come back to work, you need to make sure that your business is safe for your own staff. So that's number 1, 2, and 3 on the list, is that you've got your health and safety in order. Professional person has come in and done that, and that is all sorted and arranged. So if somebody's concerned about returning to work, what I would be doing is, first of all, of course, I would be discussing those concerns with them, and I'd be easing their concerns by describing to them exactly what measures we put into place in the workplace, how compliant we were, what changes we've made, maybe show them photos of the workplace, something like that, just to put their mind at ease that we are COVID secure, we are nice and safe for when they get back. But if that employee is outright refusing, and you've got a few options. So option 1 is you just leave them on furlough. You've got an option to leave an employee on furlough. We've got that scheme up until the end of October. What we can claim back under that scheme is diminishing. Another option you've got is agreeing with the employee that they take a period of unpaid leave, because for some businesses the staying on furlough option isn't great for them because there's no real incentive for the employee to come back. So what they're thinking about are periods of unpaid leave, and because what they can claim is tapering down. If they're not paying the employee anything and they're not claiming anything back through the job retention scheme, at least then that's not costing them the excess that's going to be coming in from August. And the other point that you've got as well is about the difference that. Sorry, just 1 second. So you've also got the options as well if you want to take something a bit more of a formal process with that employee as well. If you want to go through something a bit more formal, you can look at saying to the employee, well, it's a reasonable management instruction to bring you back into work, that there's a failure to follow a reasonable management instruction. So we're going to take something a little bit more of a formal route with that as well. So that's another option you've got as a business. But what you need to appreciate as a business owner in that circumstance is that is a significantly high risk option for you to consider. That's something that you don't want to be thinking about as a business unless you appreciate that risk, because you're going to have employees blowing the whistle as well now. You're going to have employees going to the HSE, raising these issues, the chance of HSE turning up on your site. And we've heard that with a few businesses that we've helped, a few businesses that have become clients of ours recently who've had the HSE attend their site, and that's something we've been seeing quite commonly as well. So be prepared for that as well, and that's something that's happening from employees raising issues as well. So they're all the options you've got, all the things that you need to consider in that circumstance as well. Okay, Leanne, when do you think the government will stop advising people to work from home and ask the workforce to fully return? I'm not sure. I think that gradually the guidance has been relaxed on that. And the question that a business has to answer is, can the employees work from home? Well, is doing anything from home work? If they can do 5% of their job from home, are they work? Is that they satisfy the test of working? Because I would say that doesn't classify as work. They need to be able to do their job in its entirety, and that's they can do a very small element of it from home. That isn't being able to work. So that's something that I would say that they need to think about. They need to consider as whether or not that person can work. But I would think that something's going to come out quite soon about the guidance about whether or not you've got the ability to be able to say to employees, well, they can come into work more now. The rules are going to change slightly. So I think we're going to see something about that hopefully pretty soon. So another question we've got here is, our business is part caring for the elderly on a daily basis on our site. That's okay. I'm happy with what I need to do with that. Another part is that we let out rooms for various groups. Does my risk assessment have to include all groups, or are they responsible for their own? Okay, so I don't really want to get into someone's individual risk assessment. I'm not sure that's going to be a benefit to everybody, but what I would say with that is get a professional risk assessment, get somebody in to look at that for you. Next part is, if we need to keep employees on furlough during September, for example, are we able to pay our employees at the same reduced rate that we can claim back? No, you can't. So, Wendy, on this one, simply, the employees continue to be paid up until the end of October at 80% of their pay as a minimum. That's what they get paid all the way up until the end of October, and that's not going to change. The rate of pay that they're going to get is going to remain exactly the same. What we can claim back as businesses is what's diminishing. So that's the only thing that you need to consider as a business is going to be coming down. Okay. Margaret, can we put somebody on furlough rather than paying them SSP if they are self-isolating? Yes, this got clarified a few weeks ago. So if you've got somebody who's on a period of sick pay, we can move them over to furlough as long as that's agreed with them. If they're self-isolating, so that's something that there's rules around that, but yes, that's something in principle that we can do. Okay, Kay, what if I need a member of staff in every day in July, but the following month the business is not as busy? Can I then put them back onto the flexible furlough scheme the following month? Yes, you can. It's got maximum flexibility. You can have them back in work for a period of time and then think, okay, I want to use the scheme again. As long as somebody is entitled to be claimed for under the scheme, so as in they were furloughed for a period of 3 weeks prior to the scheme starting on the 1st of July, that you can use that scheme at any period. And if you don't have somebody who's on furlough for July, August, September, but October, you think, I think I want to use the scheme again there for that individual, you've got the option to do that as well. Okay. Hannah, is it just the national insurance contributions employers cannot reclaim in August, or is it the pension contributions too? It's employers' contribution to national insurance and pension. That's what you can't claim back from August. You can't claim that back August, September, or October. So basically, the last time we can claim that back is in July. So another question here, Lynn. I'll run through this now. Is there an upper threshold on the new flexible furlough calculation and what we can claim back? So what we can claim back is in July, it's the same as it is now, 80% and up to £2,500. In August, the same, 80% up to £2,500, apart from you can't claim back the employer's contributions for national insurance and pension. In September, then you can claim back 70%, so up to £2,187.50. That's what we can claim back in September. And then in October, it's 60% up to £1,875. So they're the thresholds, they're the levels of what we can claim back over the months. I hope that helps. So Jennifer, if I want to bring back the whole team part-time instead of only half of them full-time, and obviously claim the rest back through furlough, do I need to get the agreement of the team? I think that's a brilliant way of doing it. That's exactly what I think works best for the business. I think that works best for the employees. You need to think about staging those start times and staggering them out and things like that as well. But I think that works so much better, having those individuals on a part-time basis. So would you have to get agreement with them? Yes, you need to get agreement with them because they're coming back on part-time hours on a part-time basis. If that was happening with any employee, you would get their agreement. And I think that that's the best way to do it. You would think about how that actually happens. You speak to the employees, you let them know that you want them to come back from furlough and what options you've got available, and that you want to talk to them about what those hours are and gain their agreement with them for those hours coming back, and have a nice rota set out within the workforce. So yeah, I would get agreement from the team on that, and I think that's a really good way of doing it as well. Okay, Lynn, we have been furloughing on full pay. We specified that there may be a reduction to 80%, but ensure how to do in a reasonable manner if needing to do this. Thanks. So this is a question that we've been getting asked from a lot of businesses recently who, like I said before, went into this when it was initially 3 months and thought, we want to do that for our employees. We want to pay full pay for 3 months. But now we're looking at the scheme going all the way up until the end of October, then it's going to be a bit more difficult. And they're thinking we need to revisit that for our own cash flow purposes, especially with what we can claim back under the scheme tapering down over the coming months. So what I would do with that is I would speak to the employees. I would go back to them. The manner I would do it in is I would contact the employees. I wouldn't do it by letter or by email. I would speak to them and I would let them know that the reasoning behind this, we wanted to do this for a period of time. We don't see it anytime soon where we're looking like you're coming back. We're going to keep you on furlough, but we do need to reduce as a business down what we're claiming, what we're paying you, because what we can claim back is going to be reducing as well, and we can't carry on with what we were claiming anymore. And you have that conversation with your employees, and what you would do with them then is what you need to do is get something you didn't have before. You need to get their agreement to not pay them 100% of their salary. Just think about that. You've got to get their agreement to pay them, to place them on furlough, but you've also got to get their agreement to pay them less than 100% of their wages. There's something that's separate. So get their agreement to that as well, and let them know and keep them updated on what's happening. But I think that's the manner in which I would do it, and I would get in writing their agreement. Or I would get them in writing their agreement definitely for the fact that we were going to reduce their wages down to 100%, from 100%, sorry. Veronica, yeah, this is a really good question. I think a lot of people will benefit from this. So on part-time furlough, can the amount of time we need the employee to change, employee back change, as we do not know how many or how much time we will need them for? If so, do we need a new agreement each time, or can the agreement letter state that the working days or hours can change? So I think this is a really good way to think about it. What you need to do is it's the wording of that agreement. What you don't want to be doing is every single week you're sending out a new rota to your staff and things are changing. You've got to get their agreement every single week. You don't want to be doing that. What you do want to agree is something with them, a clause or something you want to agree with them that says that we can vary these hours and we can change them and we can do it within this reason. And essentially they give their agreement to parameters of change that you can give to those hours. And then you're in a position where you can just distribute those hours out each week. Okay, I've got one here where it says, we've got 3 staff members on furlough and want to bring back 1 on an ad hoc basis from July. Okay, can I do this legally, or have to bring all staff members back, and do I have to specify hours in advance? No, you're fine to bring back. You've got 3 people on furlough and you've got work for 1 person. You're fine to bring 1 person back. That's absolutely no problem. You want to bring them back on a part-time basis and use the new flexible scheme. Yes, you can do that. And that's what a lot of businesses are doing. A lot of businesses might have 15 employees who are off on furlough at the moment, and they think, okay, well, I need a couple of people to come in and set some things up for me and work within the business before we get open. I need that to happen, so I want those people back into my business. And you get those 2 people back and you phase your employees back over the period of time. Everybody's back in November. but we phase those employees back over a period of time, and that's quite common. There's no issue with doing that. Okay, Belinda, does holiday rules remain the same, i.e. people continue to accrue? If they take holidays, it paid 100%, and do you claim the furlough during this period? This is a really good question. So think about holiday accrual. Holiday accrual is the same. Whether we're now or whether we're on the new flexible scheme, holiday accrual is the same. So they're going to continue to accrue holidays. They did exactly the same as they did before. That's not going to change. But then if you've got an employee who's back part-time, they're not going to accrue part-time hours because they're employed for their entirety in that period. Just a part of it is furloughed. So you're going to have the employee accruing that full-time, and then if they take leave, they take their leave and they get paid at full pay for that leave, but you can claim back, as long as they agree to be furloughed for that period, you can agree to claim that back under the job retention scheme as we could do before, at 80% of that as well. Okay, Adam, I'll clarify this point because I know this is a question that I keep getting asked, and a lot of people keep asking about this. I think there's a bit of confusion about how this works. So, in the later months, when what we can reclaim amount reduces to 60%, for example. So October, we can claim back 60%. We still need to put that employees will be paid at 80%, but only reclaim 60% from the government. Yes. So really simple way to look at this as a business, and the way in which it was communicated by the government when it came out, thought was a bit unclear for a business owner. And the really simple way to look at it is that what you pay to the employees is not changing. They are still getting 80%. That 80% is not reducing. They're getting paid exactly the same as they were before. It's just what we as a business can claim back. So you think about it as a payroll. What they're getting through the payroll and what we're paying as a business through the payroll doesn't diminish. That stays exactly the same. It's just what we can claim back that is going down. And so whereas you've got an employee on 80% and as a business you're claiming back 80%, it's not costing you anything at the moment. In October, it is going to cost you. It's going to cost you the 20% because you're still going to be paying them the 80, but you can only claim back 60. So that makes it really simple that what an employee receives and what an employee keeps getting paid isn't going to go down. That's going to remain exactly the same. Okay, Katie, what if we can't offer flexibility due to needing to keep in bubbles in a nursery setting? Well, if because of restrictions you've got, and I know you have ratios as well that work there, if because of restrictions you've got, you can't offer flexibility like that, then that's something that you can't offer a business. There's no obligation to offer that flexibility. You've got the option as a business to agree with an employee that you can have a flexible arrangement and use the flexible furlough system and claim under the job retention scheme. So there's no obligation to do that. And if there's business reasons as to why you can't do that, then that's absolutely fine. There's no issue with that whatsoever. And if I just have a look. Just do one more question here from Amanda. I need to unfurlough a dental nurse on the 29th of June. Can she go on to flexible working in July? Yes, as long as by the 29th of June she's been furloughed for a minimum period of 3 weeks at any point before March. So they don't need to be on furlough when the new scheme comes in and you want to use it, but they have to have been furloughed for a minimum period of 3 weeks before that point. So we got through a lot today, talking about the new flexible scheme. And as I said before, and what's happened this week is that we've had a lot of people contact us after these meetings and say, we'd like a bit more advice. We'd like to talk to you a little bit more about helping my business and coming in and actually helping our business. And I will come and meet with people who want that as well. And we've got a phone number for people to call through here. So the number is 0800 046 3179. Give us a call if you want any more advice, you want a bit of guidance. I'll come and meet with people as well. And the web address we've got is krona.co.uk/FB Live. If you want any more advice, if you've got any more questions, you want to ask us to give you any more help with any of this, which is very complicated stuff, just please get in touch with us and let us know. But we'll get back together next week, next Wednesday at 12, and we'll go through any further updates which come then and any further developments. Bye.